read this book. It's very interesting. It is, I'll give you the quick version of it. It's essentially a book about, he's a chiropractor, neuroscientist. Really, it's a little bit new agey, so don't be turned off on that. It's solid. It's very solid science. Um, but basically, he's like, look, we have emotional states that we are addicted to,
Oh, I
and
believe that. Yeah.
that is the byproduct of us living our lives up until today, us reacting to what was happening. And often what happens is we just got into a habit, like things were happening when we were little and we reacted to get afraid or anxious or mad or, whatever, lack. Um, and each one of the feelings produces a chemical, a specific chemical, and it's a kind of stimulant, and your body doesn't know if it's good or bad. It's like adrenaline, right? It's just a stimulant. And the more that you got anxious when you were little, the more you got of those chemicals, and the more that you habituated to that stimuli, like caffeine, so that when
Yeah.
you weren't doing that, you're like, oh, I should do something that's going to make me anxious so that I can get a little dump of that stuff. And then that just perpetuates it, and then that becomes a habit. And so what I like about this book is Joe's like, first of all, like people say, like, well, I have really bad anxiety. Joe would say that's your habit. Not in a
Yeah.
mean way. Like some people like that don't mean it's a sickness. I'm like, no, no, no. It's a sickness that's based on a chemical habit. That's really
Yeah.
good news. That means you can change it.
Yeah.
And so Joe's like, so through his meditations, there's a like morning and evening meditation if you're into it that you can get. Through his meditation, you basically identify each day, like you keep going back to like how are you still behaving in the habit, what are the thoughts that you're having that are coming up a lot, and then what is the feeling underneath the thought, because you see that it's the same thing over and over. And then halfway through, this is like in a hypnotic state, then halfway through he's like, okay, so what do you want to invent? So maybe you've been addicted to being anxious or afraid your whole life, but if you could addict yourself to any state of being, what would you like to be addicted to, so that your default, so that no matter what happened, you defaulted into this state. It is also a habit. Like, I have a friend who is so poor, like, they're just so poor and so many bad things happen to them and they just don't care. Like, they bought this house out in nobody know, like in Wimberley a
Yeah.
while ago, and it turned into a huge money pit. Like, just so many problems. They were just didn't know how to buy a house, and the inspector didn't see things. Then there was a big flood. Half of their house wall fell off. And then they had to like put trash bags up for walls. You know what I mean? And they were just like so happy. They're like, "Oh my God, they're just like, it's not like they're done. They're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this happened. Okay, well, let's have a party. We'll invite everybody to come over to like help us like nail up the like plastic." And they had a big party. It's just a state of being.
Yeah. Yeah,
And so
definitely.
while I always recommend everyone who's trying to get pregnant to read this book and do these meditations every day, especially like don't do the free ones that you can find online. Just read the book for free. But it's like
Yeah.
$24 for the meditations. It's really worth it. There's a morning one and an evening one, and it's a little bit long. It's like 29 minutes. But what he does is in the first half, he says, okay, so what have been the thoughts that you've been having, in the last 24 hours that are, persistent. And, you can imagine for somebody who's trying to get pregnant, who, let's say, like they just got their period, right? The whole day, they're like, I'm a fucking loser. I'm worthless. I'm broken. I'm no good. My husband's going to leave me. I hate myself. I hate my life. Right? You've been there. Well, you haven't been there yet, but and, and if you're not trying to get pregnant because you guys have just been trying, you still have like habitual thoughts that are not
Okay.
useful. And then you'll say the thoughts that you've been thinking, and you want to get dirty, like I'm worthless, like whatever it is, Um, and then he's like, what's the feeling underneath it? You know, and underneath it is like whatever it is like I'm unworthy, I don't deserve
Yeah.
it, people don't love me. Like the more that you're just with yourself in a meditation, like don't hold back. Like just really be like, what's the stuff I would never say out loud that I really do think and feel about myself? Because he says over and over, say it again to yourself so you don't forget. This is just a habit. Say it again. Say the feelings again. Say the thoughts again so that later on in the day you don't forget. And then in the day, something happens and you're like, oh, I'm such an idiot. And you're like, ooh, that's the habit. you start to get acquainted with it, and then it starts to lose its power because you're like, oh, that's just the habit. Let me try again. Okay, that was I should have thought that through more carefully. That's still really
Yeah.
different. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and then in the second half, you're like, well, you know, like for me, I want to make a lot of things. I really like to build things, and I read things, I hear things. I'm like, oh, I want to make something for you guys. But what happens is my team is too small and it creates a lot of chaos. And then the customers are mad, even though I'm trying to do something good. And it can be really frustrating. So my thing that I'm working on addicting myself to is being
Mm.
being limitless. That I can envision something, I can bring it into life, I can serve people with it. And then I have a team of people who like makes it all work perfectly and keeps everybody happy around it. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so and that can change. So when you think about what you want to addict yourself to, don't worry about getting it right. Like in a month, if you're like, that's not quite the right one,
Yeah,
start
yeah.
addicting yourself to something different or multiple things.
Yeah,
But
totally true.
if
It kind of
limitlessness, like if limitlessness is the thing that you want to be addicted to, that pick your own. But then in the meditation, you'll say, so what does your life look like when you're limitless?
and so the meditation is attached to this book. Is it online or where is it again?
Yeah, I think it'll tell you in the book, but if you just go to the official Joe Dispenza website, he has a bunch of different meditations. Just start with the morning
Okay.
and evening ones.